Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Noma Cork by Vinventions. Driven by a commitment to innovation, the new plant-based Noma Cork Green Line offers significant improvements in wine closure performance. Thanks to a rigorous oxygen ingress rate, you can decide which cork is best for your wine, whether it's for young and fresh wines or for those with ageing potential.
Sara Danese is a financial consultant and investment analyst who uses her experience and expertise to write about the fine wine world in her spare time. Her newsletter, In the Mood for Wine, is a brilliant overview of the sector. Our fascinating chat covered Bordeaux En Primeur, extravagant, unregulated claims made by some wine investment platforms, passion assets, the Liv-Ex 100 index, and why the first rule of investment is diversification.
Hello, Sara, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me here.
It's really nice to hear your voice. You're in London, I think. I'm doing this from Argentina, but you're in London.
Yes, I'm in London, working from home. And please excuse if you hear the baby every now and then. But I have a 7-month in the other room.
Okay, so we'll give the baby a walk-on part. Is it a boy or a girl?
Girl, Isabella.
Little girl. Okay, well, Isabella, we'll mention Isabella at the end. People can hear, your English is fantastic, obviously, but you're Italian. You now live in the UK. Just tell us a bit about your background. Were you brought up in a wine region? Was wine part of your life when you were growing up?
Yes and no. I'm from Verona, which, is the region of Valpolicella, but I don't come from a family of winemakers. But as you might know from Europeans, wine is kind of part of our lives. And so I was brought up with it. Our neighbor had a, small production, but yeah, so it's always been part of our lives, but not in a professional way. And I didn't come to wine until much later in my life. So.
Yeah, but I've always liked that thing about Italy and France that kids drink wine. Not kids like Isabella, but people drink watered down wine, don't they, with a meal,
yeah, exactly.
And it just becomes part of your life rather than being, for us, like suddenly you turn 18 and you're allowed officially to drink alcohol. It's kind of huge liberation. Italy, it always seems to me to be rather beautifully woven into a way of life.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it doesn't have that stigma attached to it. So, or that liberation, as you say. So it's just normal to have, a little glass of wine with your meal and, kids watered down glass of wine. But yeah, it's always been part of the lifestyle in Italy, France, Spain. So.
Yeah, that's why I like all of those countries so much, really. Listen, you studied economics at Padova University, start of this rather brilliant career. What was your career plan at the time? Did you think, I want to go into the financial world, or did you not really know? Wine investment came later, didn't it?
Yeah. So I studied economics in Padova, and I graduated in 2011, which I don't know if you know, but it was a big banking crisis. It was not very good timing to graduate in economics then. And so I was one of those people that like, I'm going to have to move to the UK to find a job. And so that's what I did. I just came here. My plan was to work in finance. I found a job first with a small startup in the UK in London. And then I had a offer for a Master Imperial in Financial Engineering. So I did that and then started working in asset management. And so that's how I started my move to the UK, essentially.
You've had this amazing career very quickly. It gave me the nosebleed reading it almost. It's been so high flying. But, you're a financial consultant, you're an investment analyst. I just remember, I want to know how much of what you do, and I suppose advise is the wrong word, but maybe you can talk a bit more about that. How much of what you do is based on data, and how much of what you do is intuition, where you think, hey, okay, I'm going to follow that. It seems to me that really good financial analysts have a slightly sixth sense about markets. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. I think you have built this market knowledge, so macroeconomic knowledge, and you do have an intuition. For example, you think, I don't know, I think these companies or this asset class is going to do well in this current market environment. And then what you do, you go and try to disprove your theory with data. And so that's how it works a little bit. But you do have to take a leap in a sense, because you don't know everything. You don't have perfect information. You're always going to have some unknown variables, and so you have to take that, gut feeling sometimes, but it needs to be well backed up with data and research.
Well, partly because you're not playing with other people's money, but you're giving them advice, or you're giving them information which could affect their financial status, really. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I think, in the asset management work, you kind of work with professional investors. So you kind of talk at the same level, what the financials are. But when I, write about fine wine investing, is probably from my point of view, and so from my financial situation, and but you need to always be careful that the arguments are well constructed and it's not dogma in a sense.
Yeah.
You need to give the tools to make the decisions.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about the newsletter, because it's called In the Mood for Wine. It's very good, very insightful, very in-depth, actually. And it's really, as you put it, the only publication that discusses the fine wine market as what you call an asset class. Just tell us how the blog came about and who reads it and how you finance it. How much of your life is it as well?
Yeah, so I started it a couple of years ago. You might remember that time, the fine wine market was very buoyant, very, very hot, almost a bubble. And I'm sure you've read a lot of articles yourselves that were like, fine wine, with fine wine, you make more money than in the equity market, or it makes more money than this company or that company. And I thought a lot of this advice was very, misguided, and it didn't highlight, it didn't quite got the point and give the right advice. You don't give the advice to invest in a market that it's in a bubble, but it's because a lot of writer were perhaps had a vested interest in selling wine, etc. So I thought at that point, I can write something better than this, and so that's how I started. And now it's a work of passion. So I do it on the side. It's not my full-time work, but I do have some interesting partnerships. Liv-Ex provides me with the data, which I'm very, very grateful for, because otherwise it would be very hard to do. And I also have a partnership with Saturnalia, which is an Italian startup. They also do something with satellites and trying to analyze the satellite data from vineyards to make investment decisions. So I do have some partnership, but it's mostly a work of passion.
So
yes.
You make a bit of money out of it, do you?
A little bit, yeah, just not much.
Okay. Well, welcome to the club. That's journalism for you, isn't it, really? Yeah. I suppose before we go a bit deeper into this, we should come up with a definition of fine wine. I always wonder who decides if it's fine. Who are the gatekeepers, as it were? You've mentioned the Liv-Ex Fine Wine 100 Index. Are they the gatekeepers? Is it journalists? Is it collectors? Is it a bit of everything? Is it auction houses? I don't know, really.
Well, I think it's people like you, wine critics have a big part to play in defining fine wine. And I think there's this Areni, I don't know if you know them, but they are like a
Areni, very good. Areni Global, yeah.
Yes. And they have a definition which is very systematic. And I think if I can summarize it, it's, fine wine needs to be good and also needs to be recognized as good by wine critics. So it's not just about being good. It needs to be, be put in front of people such as yourselves and other wine critics to be, appreciated. And Liv-Ex plays a role, but I think they more follow the trend of what is recognized fine wine by by critics and things like that. But I think the definition is very blurred, especially in markets in now at the moment, right? It used to be like owned by Burgundy and Bordeaux, and very established. But I think now the newer generation maybe are interested in niche wines and discover some other wines that are not those that were defined as such historically.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I suppose that was going to be my next question in a way, and I suppose you've answered it in a sense. But can fine wine come from anywhere? I mean, I write about places which aren't French predominantly. Argentina, South Africa, Spain, Chile. They all make fine wines. I think, not exclusively, obviously, as well as places like Greece. Now, are we seeing the world expanding? Do you think in terms of what is fine in inverted commas?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's also a lot to do with the globalization of knowledge, right? Like, now the newer generation are more educated, maybe it's the wrong word, but, they have better tools to understand what, makes a fine wine and, how to make it. And, Argentina, where you are, I'm sure you visited many fine wines, but Catana, for example, is a very good example of a winery that's been leading the way on Argentinian fine wines. And I think now with the trend of high altitude and climate change, I'm sure a lot of will follow suit and will benefit from the knowledge that they've built in the region.
Well, and I suppose social media is important, isn't it, as well, these days? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is important because it helps these winemakers to make a name for themselves and show their work, and so share their work. And so I think that's quite important, yes.
I mean, I wonder if the process is a bit faster these days. I mean, in the old days, when I started sort of 30 years ago, it had to be an auction wine, or it had to be sort of sanctioned by fine wine merchants, as it were. And now it seems that people can make a reputation quite quickly. I mean, not overnight, but within a decade, you can be considered a fine wine producer. Is that true?
Yeah, I think so. Like if you even think about the Super Tuscans, they built a reputation, not overnight, but they set the standards. They knew what they were doing, what the target was, and they did that. They went outside the appellation, which is almost impossible in Italian, bureaucracy.
Surely not.
But yeah, no, I think so. I think that was the, one of the key of the success, to try and build the reputations for themselves and be free to explore how to make wine for themselves. So yes.
I mean, is the fine wine market becoming less conservative, I suppose we could say, in a way?
Yeah, I would hope so. I think so. Someone has recently told me that the Gen X, which is the current bigger, buyer of fine wine, have another 10 years before they realize that they have got more wine than time to drink it.
I know that feeling.
So I think in the next 10 years we'll see a generational change. Well, we've already seen a generational change, right? In how, and I think the younger generation are more interested in different things like drink less. We all know that drink less, better. So I think there's going to be a renaissance of. I'm very excited because the going to be a lot of new winemakers, a bit like grower champagne, that wave, I think, is going to be repeated across other regions.
Yeah. But I also want to ask you, are the fine wine markets and the investment markets the same thing, or are they different?
I think they're the same thing, right? Because I think about the same. I think if you think a collector, maybe think of themselves as someone that just accumulates wine without selling it, but also a fine wine investor. You don't invest in wine to make money quick, right? You invest in wine to sit in it and maybe make a return in 10 years' time that covers your your expenditure and your drinking habit. That's it. But I think if you wanted to make money quick, you would invest in the stock markets. But I think instead, it's very much the same thing. It's a long-term game, and so collectors and investors are very similar.
It's interesting because I don't know whether your Instagram feed is the same, but these things pop up on my Instagram feed all the time saying, make hundreds of thousands of pounds out of fine wine. Call us. We both know that's snake oil. Salesman doing it in a sense, isn't it? There are exceptions where if you invest in something at a point when it's undervalued, but those are the exceptions rather than the rule, aren't they?
No, exactly. And I think it's very disingenuous. I think it's only, you could only do it because it's a non-regulated asset class. If you did that with like stocks, the FCA would come to you and make you take it down. Like it's very disingenuous way of presenting. And I think it's a very interesting, it's a passion asset, right? And it's a very interesting thing to invest your money in, but it's not one of those asset classes that are going to give you, quick money and soon. And
oh, well, thank you for your honesty. And I think anybody listening to this should take those words very, very seriously. Well, one thing I want to ask you is, does a wine have to be tradable? In other words, does it have to be part of a secondary market to be what we might call a good investment? Or is a little bit of that crystal ball gazing we talked about where you think, hey, this might be famous in 10 years' time, it might be tradable? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, you want, when you build a portfolio, you want to have a little bit of those tradable names. You want to have the big Bordeaux, that are very liquid and very tradable. But at the same time, you want, I think the more you get into wine collecting, the more you want to explore these wines that you bet on it. You invest on these smaller wines and you hope they're going to become tradable. They might not be, but I think chances are is that if you did, a lot of background work on it, and they probably will become, recognized in 10 years' time, but it's not something that happens overnight. And if they don't, you can still drink it. So that's
that was going to be exactly my point. That it's a nice asset class. That the worst thing that's going to happen is you have to drink it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Just tell me which parts of the wine world you think are undervalued and overvalued. Places like Burgundy, the prices have gone absolutely crazy in the last sort of 5 years, or they've come back down a bit more recently, haven't they? Which bits do you think are overvalued and undervalued at the moment?
Well, I think the market has come down quite a bit. So we are now at 2020, end of 2021 level. So at the moment, I think we don't see that the wine market being overvalued. But of course, the places like Burgundy, even though they're now down quite a bit, 15, 20%, it's still quite expensive to get a Grand Cru or even a Premier Cru. Like there's no two way around it. And for me, it's a bit interesting because I think a lot of the new wine critics or sommelier don't have the chance to taste these fine wines, and so perhaps in the future they're not going to be able to recommend it or to put it on the map because it's so outside of most collectors and investors reach. But I do think that Italy, for example, is another place where it's very undervalued. Spain, so many great wines, and well, better than me, Spain but some fine wine to go a third of what you would pay, a Bordeaux wine. But
less.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, even less, I think. Don't you?
Yes, exactly. And I think Barolo and Bulgari for me they're still undervalued compared to other French more recognized region, and I think part of it is because France has more investment, professional investment into chateaus, and so they've been better positioned, had better investment to sell it, to go out and sell it, whilst a winemaker doesn't necessarily have that same pull, but it will change.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, about Bordeaux. Is Bordeaux still the kind of core of the fine wine business and the fine wine investment business?
I think so. There's no two way around it, right? It's like I think they attract all these wine critics. If you think about how many people cover Bordeaux, how many wine critics, I don't know, dozens, whilst how many people covers Barolo? Probably 2 or 3, 4.
2.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very hard to for other regions to have the same level of exposure. And so I think because of the investment that we just talked about, they're necessarily the most tradable, and also because of Laplace, that does a lot of the distribution work. Yeah. That's also a factor in why they are in that position in the fine wine investing world.
Yeah. So I mean, if you were advising a friend, I know you don't like the word advice, but you were thinking on behalf of a friend, and he's got £5,000 to invest, would you say go to Spain or Barolo, or would you say Bordeaux is a sort of safer bet still?
Well, first of all, the first rule of investment is diversification. So trying to diversify, but I think there are also 2 rules in fine wine investing, which is always buy what's scarce, and always buy what you like to drink. So never go and buy something that you wouldn't drink. But also, if you have a chance to buy something, trying to spend your money in something that you won't be able to find on the market in even next month. Something that is scarce. So yeah, I personally would invest in, certain areas of Bordeaux that I like, the chateaus that you like for sure. But also I invest a lot in Barolo and, Bulgaria, or, areas that I like, or Champagne, and, something that I would like to drink as well.
Yeah. I'm delighted you mentioned the word drinking, because I have this vision sometimes of wine collectors and wine investors as people who sort of stack up these piles of wine without actually pulling corks. I mean, is that unfair? Do you know people like that, or are all of these collectors, investors also drinkers?
I think that I don't know. The younger, poorer demographic of wine collectors feel very conscious about opening a wine that cost them, £300 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think at the beginning of the wine collecting journey, there is a little bit of reticence to do that, and maybe later on they do more of it. But yeah, I think some people do buy wines and say, I hope I'll be able to afford it to drink it.
To drink it.
so yeah, but no, I think generally people that go into wine collecting is people that like to drink it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a slightly unfair characterization by me, really. I mean, I just wonder if there are wines that you would invest in that you wouldn't drink, or do you tend to follow that advice yourself? Do you think, I want to drink it? You've got a baby now, so that's going to be, you've probably got less money to spend on wine.
Yeah, lots less. But I do think that that's the first rule of investing in wine. Like, you have to want to drink this wine, and I I would not, mainly because I think if I don't want to drink this wine, then there is no amount of there is not going to be a price low enough to convince me that this wine is good, that, it's good value. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah, it does totally make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think this wine is not worth my money. And no matter what wine critics say, or, I just think it's not worth it.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear you say that, because I totally agree. Just, you mentioned this earlier, you said that the fine wine market's not in a great shape at the moment. What are the things that are affecting its performance, and do you think it's reached its bottom?
I think higher interest rates market are not very good for, investing in fine wine, for the fine wine markets, because as an investor, if you can make 5% keeping your money in cash, you wouldn't want to invest that money into a much high risk asset class such as fine wine. So that's why 2023 has been quite dreadful for the fine wine markets, and probably 2024 will be similar. But the question of the bottom, a lot of people want to perfectly time the wine market to reach the real bottom. But really, what investors do is that when the market is going down, you try and find opportunities. So you're not going to be, no one can perfectly time the market unless, I don't know, they see the future. But what you do is that the market is going down and you buy a little bit and what you think it's a good value. And then, and then you are better positioned to then, when the market's going up, to benefit from an appreciation in price.
Well, and I suppose also the market doesn't go down uniformly, does it? And as you mentioned, Barolo, there might be people are very interested in Barolo, and rightly so at the moment. Whereas, I don't know, things like Burgundy might be going down a bit because it was overvalued. So it's not just one market, it's lots of markets, isn't it?
Exactly. For example, Italy hasn't gone down as much as Burgundy, for example, but that's because it hadn't gone up as much as Burgundy. And so, the peak wasn't as sharp, and the bottom isn't as sharp. And I think now it's just a good time to see if you can find some gems in the market. I think it's a great market for buying at the moment.
That's interesting. I mean, Bordeaux En Primeur, this sort of big campaign that happens every year, used to be a big part of the fine wine world and of selling wine to investors and collectors. But the 2022 vintage, I didn't taste it, but apparently everyone said it was very good. But it was a bit of a flop, wasn't it? I just wonder, again, are we slightly shifting away from that En Primeur model as being the centre of the fine wine investment business?
Well, I think they are pushing people away from that model, but buying En Primeur, it's very much like buying a house off plan, right? So if you expect it to be cheaper because there are risks to it, and those risks, cause the price to be cheaper. But if you sell in a wine at a really exorbitant price, En Primeur, then as an investor myself, and a lot of other people I spoke to, were like, well, we can buy in 2-3 years' time when that risk is not there, when it's bottled and we tasted it and we know what it's going to taste like. So I think that strategy was a little bit, not very well perceived.
Or thought through, I don't think.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's also true that, you can buy older vintages, mature vintages of the same chateau cheaper, which, as you said, have got a track record and you know what they taste like, and lots of people have tasted them and you made them taste it yourself, right? So as you said, it seems slightly silly to me to buy these wines that you're not going to drink for at least 10 years anyway. Yeah, exactly. And you're accumulating the risk, right? Not them. And
also, it's not that for Bordeaux, the scarcity is not a real problem. And so I know that in 10 years' time, I can find the 22 vintage easily. So why would I do that? Why would I tie up my money like this? it makes no sense.
Tell us a bit about, we've mentioned the 2022 vintage. I wonder in general about vintages, how they develop reputations as, good, bad, great, indifferent. Does the market decide in a way over time?
I think a lot of it is, to be honest, critics. If a critics normally, come out and say this vintage is good, there's very, on vintages quality, there's very little discrepancies between one wine critic and the other. And so, for example, Bordeaux 2022 was widely accepted as a great vintage, and so perhaps that's why it was priced as it was. But yeah, I think maybe the question is for you: how do you feel about this? The role of being holding the quality of a vintage in your hand, in your pen.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I mean, I write about Spain, obviously, and I just wrote about Rioja, and I said that the 2021 vintage was the greatest vintage for me since 2001. I'm not saying that's going to kind of move markets around the world, but it will have it has an impact on the perception of that vintage, I think. I mean, I think it comes with a degree of responsibility. I don't think we should say these things stupidly. And I think there are some journalists who do say things for effect and exaggerate a bit and without really engaging their critical faculty. So no, I think it's a good point by you, really. It's a rhetorical question in a way, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah.
Tell me, there's one of the things I liked in your blog, and I recommend it very highly to people. It's called In the Mood for Wine. It's free to sign up. Yeah. Just hand over your details. And you said that inaction can be the most effective strategy. Can you say what you mean? Do you think that sometimes when you shouldn't sell and you shouldn't buy? Are we talking about selling or buying or both?
Both. I think a lot of people perhaps have regretted not selling, their champagne, 2 years ago when they had the chance. And so if when the market is going up, you decide what you decide or you don't sell, that affects the returns of your total portfolio. But the same comes in now. Now everybody's asking me about, is it a bottom? Is it a bottom? I think you should be buying. I don't know if exactly it's going to be the bottom, but it's a good time to build your portfolio up. Because the prices are very favorable generally. So if you don't do that, maybe you are going to miss the rally, if there's going to be a rally in the future. And so you will be buying at higher prices when the market is more confident. And, I think, inaction is very, is very powerful. I experienced it the first time when 2014, all the kids were buying Bitcoin. And I was like, no, I don't think it's worth it. And then people that invested £50, that had £5,000. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to wait until it comes down. And then it went up and I was like, oh my God. And so Bitcoin for me is but at the same time, same people that, saw their Bitcoin go from £50 to £10,000, they didn't sell, and they might got stuck with a crash. And so, as I said, inactivity is very powerful when it comes to these things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if right now is even a good time to negotiate a bit, isn't it, with fine wine merchants? I mean, a lot of them must have a lot of quite expensive stock sitting there, for which they have to pay storage charges and things like that. Is it worth putting in a phone call to a few of these people and saying, fancy flogging a bit of that?
Yeah, I think so. To be honest, I at the moment is a perfect time to buy because as you said, in fact, when I thought that the 2022 En Primeur was a little bit a flop, when I received offers on wines that I would normally, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's very interesting. It reached down to me, so it means that they're very desperate. So that's, I think.
What, saying how much Lafite would you like or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wonder how you think the fine wine market is going to develop over the next decade, and what are the main factors that influence it? Is it wars? Is it inflation? I mean, climate change, public taste. I mean, I'm asking you to look into a crystal ball, I know, which is almost impossible, but just, how do you think, if you were to take a punt on it, how do you think this thing's going to develop over the next decade or so?
I think, it's going to be a lot shaped a lot by the taste of the coming generations. And so, we already heard that, better quality wine, but, all the big mass produced wine that's I think it's going to go away, and a lot of people are going to start making better quality wine, also because the newer generation are coming into the to winemaking, are inheriting the vineyards from their parents, and so they are going to be more focused on sustainability and climate change. And I think that's going to be super important in the way fine wine market is going to be perceived. We're going to look at regions. For example, I'm working on Alto Piemonte, a region where they make Nebbiolo, Gattinara, and all these kind of wines, and it's cooler than Barolo, and so much more interesting given the climate change. And we know Etna has exploded in the last 5 years. Trentino's wines, Argentinian wines in high altitude. So I think a lot of it is going to be driven by that. And wars and inflation is kind of come and go, and they may affect one specific year, but I think the trend is about climate change and sustainability.
I want to ask you very quickly just about the work you do with Forward Inc., which sounds really interesting because you help refugees, don't you, to pursue their entrepreneurial dreams. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I love Forward Inc. I think they're doing a great job. But so they work with refugees, and because refugees get benefits from the state, when they want to register their business, they can't just register their business. They have to submit a business plan, and it has to be more detailed than that. And so what they do is help them to create that business plan and that thinking, and to get to know the Netherlands market is based in the Netherlands. And so I worked with a lot of interesting parties. Like I worked with a lady from Yemen that wanted to import Yemenese honey, but it's not very easy to do that because of we all know the situation. And what I find is that a lot of these refugees really, really love their country, and they are proud of the products that come from their country. And so they want to import it. And so, for example, I worked more recently with a Syrian sommelier that wanted to import Syrian wine and Croatian wine, very niche wines into the Netherlands. And so it's super interesting. I think, I get a lot out of it, probably more than they do.
Sounds brilliant. Listen, final question is how you relax. I mean, you've got a baby, so it makes life a bit harder, right? Yeah. How do you get away from this world of investment and wine? I mean, you're quite sporty. I mean, I was amazed you used to be a professional volleyball player, right? Do you still play? Are you still competitive?
I'm very competitive. But my volleyball days, I play, actually, used to play before the baby beach volleyball here in London, which is almost
the beaches of London.
Yeah, the beaches of Crystal Palace. Because essentially the Brazilian team, the beach volleyball Brazilian team, built the courts during the London Olympics. So now we have 3 courts with sand, and so it's really nice. I love it. On Saturdays you go there, and it's more fun than competitive. But yeah, it's very sometimes you need to play in the rain.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. Listen, Sara, thank you so much. I mean, so much good advice, I think, about the fine wine market, where to invest, where not to invest for the future. Thank you to Isabella for keeping quiet in the background. It was very good. And I hope to see you very soon. Thank you so much for appearing on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Tim, for having me. It was a pleasure, and hope to see you soon.
Well, lots of really good advice there, not least to buy wines that you like above all. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Dominic Huber from Terroir Al Limit in Priorat. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @TimAtkin and on Instagram @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.